Welcome to your first unit test review podcast. I wish we had time for in-class test review, but we don't. So I'm bribing students into watching these review lectures by giving away, at least this first time, a lot of the answers. So what's on the test? First, you will get all of the matching questions that are already up on Moodle, except for dates. The toughest questions are probably the places and materials, but you simply have to know them, so practice. You will have 28 multiple choice questions. Some are from the College Board, some are from other sources, some I made up. I'm trying to find questions that reflect the College Board's new, more analytical and more comparative approach. Some of the questions that I'm going to ask on this test I went over in the Introduction to the AP Test lecture that we did not have time to finish in class, but is up on Moodle. I highly recommend you watch this podcast as well. As on the actual AP exam, some of the questions will include one or more images. Others will assume that you remember the image. So here's the start of the long essay question. I expect this to take you, say, 15 to 20 minutes to write. You may bring in handwritten notes, but not a completed essay, and you may not use your workbooks on the test. So I think this question is pretty self-explanatory. Give a full identification for the work you've chosen. That means in addition to title, date, culture, materials, and or technique, as well as the title. Explain where it is located or where it was found, not only the geographic location, but the kind of site. So, if it was found in a garbage dump in Draper, you should have both the information that it was a garbage dump and the information that it was Draper. Then I want you to discuss what this location might suggest about the function or use of the work. So the empty Coke can found in that garbage dump in Draper suggests ritual libations, right? Notice the word suggest. These are prehistoric works, and we simply don't know for sure. If you do end up writing an essay on a prehistoric work on the actual AP test, I recommend you make this point very clear. And this brings me to the last part of the question. Discuss one possible explanation for the work's meaning or significance to its culture, and support this with specific evidence. This can be evidence from the work itself or from similar works. Feel free, by the way, to do more research on the work you chose. The new AP exam is also going to ask you to apply the knowledge you've gained from required works to similar works that you've not seen. I'm going to give you a rock art image that was not assigned and is not one of the images on this slide, although it's somewhat similar. You will need to identify two features, two characteristics of this unknown work that are similar to those you've seen in one of the three rock art works we've studied. The Apollo 11 stones, the paintings in the Lascaux caves, or the running horned woman. This isn't really an essay. I just want two clear sentences naming the feature and explaining how it shows up in the work that I will be giving you on the exam and one of the required works that you've studied. I don't think you'll find this hard, but you should review your rock art. Here again, this is not the image that I'm going to give you. This sleeping antelope was carved into a rock in Algeria. The animal I will show you was carved into a rock in France. But if you can figure out the answer for this image, you'll get the other one right as well. You should have the name for this kind of perspective in your notes, and you should be able to find the work that also employs this perspective. To name the work that also employs this perspective. So this question shows up with somewhat different wording 3 times on your test. Why? Because it shows up in some form or another in all of my question sources. Prehistoric artists, it's true, did not care about giving us a ground line or showing where these figures were oriented in space. And did I just give you a characteristic of prehistoric rock art? I think I did. At any rate, multiple artists added figures over long periods of time, so we can't really draw any conclusions about the intended composition of these works from the jumble of figures that we see. So why were the rocks at Stonehenge probably arranged the way that they were? This photo, which will not appear on the test, gives you a very broad hint. But you have to know when this happened, what time of year. Just knowing that this photo shows a sunrise will not be enough to answer the question correctly. Okay, the image does not accompany this question on the test. I'm just helping you out. In fact, I'm going to give you the answer to this question because this is one of the College Board written questions that irks me. I have even complained about this question on the teacher listserv, and I was joined by a number of other teachers who agreed with me. Scholars think that the shape of the jade cong, a square with a circular hole, may symbolize the earth, which the Chinese viewed as having 4 corners, and the sky, which they viewed as being round. The carved face, likewise, has an iconography similar to later Chinese works. We'll actually look at one of these. That's the right answer, shape and iconography. But I frankly think that some of the other answers make sense. The cong was made of a highly valued, though not especially scarce stone, jade, that was hard to work. The cong likewise seems highly stylized. The College Board uses the term reductive simplicity. I think that mostly means stylized. While the cong was not a large item, it was fairly large for a jade carving from a single piece of jade. The most obvious answer isn't one of the choices. The jade cong was found at a burial site with other rare and costly items, which suggests association with burial rituals, but I guess that would make too much sense. Jade is beautiful. It has subtle variations of color. It is also very hard, so it is hard to work but also long-lasting. Note that jade is not scarce, although it was highly valued. While jade is often subtly multicolored, it is not iridescent. In other words, its surface does not change color in different lights the way, say, a soap bubble does. And it is not soft. If you can work your way through that, you've got the answer. So I told you you were most likely to be asked a question about this work that referred to its status as, you can fill in the blank. And you can take it from there. This is an easy and obvious question, but I could see it appearing on an AP exam, mostly because there's not much more to ask about this work. But you might notice how the animal is depicted or portrayed to help you on the short essay question. Okay, here's another question that I complained about to the College Board. What is the content, especially since we really don't know what that two-faced figure represents? Is it a representation of some concept of duality, such as good versus evil? Maybe. Yet it's a figurine, like the emblem stone, and it has a weird face, like the lapida carving. The College Board says that the answer is the jade cong has a subject that is most similar to that of the Tlaltico figurine. Well, it's true that both the jade cong and the Tlaltico figurine seem to have a kind of monster face, and both works may suggest a duality, again, such as the duality between earth and heaven. But the lapida fragment has a stylized face too, and the emblem stone is also a figurine. So I find this a confusing question, but I just gave you the correct answer. So, actually, I hope you're thinking, why did I put a question on the test that I think is confusing, if not downright misleading? And the answer is that you need to get used to the way the College Board writes questions, even when I think they've written them in a way that's confusing. Remember, too, that the people working on this exam are still figuring out the new curriculum, and I would be very surprised if there aren't other questions that we teachers find more than a little irksome. But we all need to peer into the confusing mind of the folks who write these exams, even if it makes our heads hurt. So, what's the latest theory about what these paintings were intended for? We talked about this in class. Think black elk. What can I say? Art historians are a suspicious bunch, and we talked about this in class as well. And not only did we talk about this question in class, but it was on one of your quizzes. So there are 3 questions on this work, which is actually global contemporary, in other words, post-1980. I went over all of the questions on this work in my podcast introduction to AP Art History. And of course, this is one of your summer works. So you can find all the answers. You just have to listen to the other podcast. Now, I went over this question and the complicated terms included in the answer choices, both in class and on the Introduction to the AP Exam podcast. Most of you got this right in class the first time around. This is an easy question if you remember or look up where this work was found. And here you need to know the term that your book uses. But really, it's an easy question. Okay, a warning goes with this one. On the test, you will get the name of this work, but you will not get this image. So this is a classic example of a question where you will need some visual recall of the work. If you remember what it looks like, the answer will be obvious, but you have to remember what it looks like. So, another of our post-1980 works, but you read about this. Remember when we were reading about a depiction of animals. So what do those cans of corned beef symbolize? If you don't remember, you should check the reading again. Remember that this one actually caught me by surprise. On the AP exam, you will often get questions about a pair of images. Some will ask about the works individually, some will compare them. This is the only pair of images that will appear on this test. You need to know where both works are from, where they were found, and that's just a repeat of your matching question, right? You also need to know the function of the work on the left, which is clearly related to where it was found. Both works are stylized. You need to remember what that term means. Recall that political party elephant and the political party donkey, those were stylized. For the image on the left, you need to know what anthropomorphized means. And for the image on the right, you need to know what kind of tools the artist used. This is a Neolithic work, right? So what does the lith in Paleolithic and Neolithic mean? And finally, there's a question that irritated me. Both works probably had a function that was, and you have a series of choices. I'm just going to tell you the right answer. It's religious and ceremonial. Okay, the stele was a burial work. The ambum stone probably wasn't. Another choice is commemorative and memorial. Clearly the stele was commemorative and memorial, but probably the ambum stone wasn't. It was part of a mortar and pestle after all. But of course we don't really know, and we do know, intriguingly, that modern day people from Papua New Guinea actually worship these objects as spirit stones. Likewise, the stele might have had a governmental or civic purpose. Maybe this was a leader, a king. The ambum stone probably doesn't, but perhaps it was a animal reincarnation of the leader. We don't know for certain. Anyway, I just gave you the right answer as a reward for getting this far and for peering once again into the mind of the College Board. Well, you probably don't need this good luck if you've made it this far in the podcast, but good luck on the test.